Hi, my name is Phil Lopes. I represented West Central Tucson in the Arizona House of Representatives from 2003 to 2011. I want to share with you my views of the 9 propositions on this November's ballot. For each proposition, I will give a summary of the proposition, arguments for and against, and those arguments will be in the words of the proponents and the opponents. My opinion, when I have one, on the motivation for presenting the proposition, major supporters and opponents, and then finally my personal take on each of the propositions. The first 7 of the 9 propositions were referred to the voters by the legislature. There are 2 ways things can get on the ballot. One is by referral from the legislature. The other is by citizen initiative. The first 7 are referrals from the legislature. The first one is Proposition 114. Proposition 114 protects crime victims from liability for damages suffered by a person who was injured while that person committed or attempted to commit a felony against the victim. The arguments for Proposition 114 are that it would prevent criminals from suing the person they victimized. The major argument against 114 is that it changes the current constitutional provision that, quote, the right to recover for damages for death or injury may not be limited. Motivation for this is that many in the legislature, a majority I would say, feel that criminals have too many rights, victims have too few. The major supporters of Proposition 114 are former Senator Russell Pierce and the Arizona Citizens Defense League. My take on 114 is that changing the Arizona Constitution to limit a person's ability to seek redress is not a good idea. I'm voting no on Proposition 114. Proposition 115, again referred by the legislature, and it has to do with selection of judges. In summary, Proposition 114 amends the state constitution to change the voter-adopted merit selection system for judges. It would reduce the role of the state bar in making nominations for the Judicial Selections Commission, and it will increase the number of candidates presented to the governor for each opening. It would also increase the judicial retirement age, and judicial performance review would include legislative hearings where judges could be questioned about their decisions. The arguments for Proposition 115 are that the governor will have more choices in making appointments, and the legislature can play a more significant role by holding hearings before judicial retention elections. The second argument for 115 is it minimizes the influence of the state bar. I should say at this time that the current law as regards retention of judges, every time a judge comes up for retention, there's a survey that's done and completed by all attorneys who have appeared before that judge. They fill out a long questionnaire. Their answers are then summarized in the ballot information so that the voter knows how the lawyers feel about the judge. And then the voter bases his or her vote on that assessment. The arguments against, I should say one other thing. I mentioned commissions. There are a couple of commissions that are put together by the governor and the state bar. Those commissions are the ones that actually interview the candidates for judgeships, and then they make 3 recommendations to the governor. So this proposal affects both the way those commissions are created as well as the way judges are retained. Let me talk now about the arguments against Proposition 115. It is a result of a deal between the current leaders of the state bar and judiciary and the legislature. And the deal was struck in order to avoid a more drastic replacement of the merit system pushed by Republican legislative leadership and the governor. Second argument against, there's widespread support for the present system. It's a model system. It's widely acclaimed, except that ultra-conservative political leaders and groups don't like the way it's done. Third argument against, legislative hearings before retention elections will result in judges being cross-examined on their rulings by legislators, replacing an independent, nonpartisan evaluation process. Last argument against, it will politicize the selection and retention of judges, weaken the separation of powers, and threaten judicial independence and impartiality. The motivation, as I speculate, is that conservative extremists are often very unhappy with judicial decisions. Thus, they feel that elected officials, politicians, need to inject themselves more in the judicial process in hopes that decisions made by judges will be more amenable to them. The major supporters of Proposition 115 are the governor, president of the Senate, Speaker of the House, State Bar, Arizona Judges Association. Major opponents to 115, League of Women Voters, the 5 previous Chief Justices of the Arizona Supreme Court, and the Arizona Democratic Party. My take, conservative extremists want judges elected. An election of judges is a system which is a disaster in other states. This Proposition 115, I think, is a half step toward having election of judges. Our system has worked well. There's no problem here to fix. I'm voting no on Proposition 115. Proposition 116, again referred by the legislature, sets the amount exempt from annual taxes on business equipment and machinery purchased after 2012 to an amount equal to the combined earnings of 50 Arizona workers. The major argument for Proposition 116 is that it will create jobs by exempting full cash value of equipment and machinery or personal property used in agriculture or in trade or business. Currently, there's a $50,000 exemption. This would change that exemption level. The motivation, as I assess it, is there are many people in the legislature who feel we pay too many taxes. They want to reduce the number of taxes we pay. So this is just an effort at chipping away at the tax base in the state of Arizona. Major supporters, unsurprisingly, National Federation of Independent Business, Farm Bureau, State Chamber. My take, over the years, many similar efforts have been billed as job creators, but evidence is scant that any jobs were actually created. And there's no evidence that this effort will be any different. and state revenues, which we need more of, will be reduced. I'm voting no on 116. 117. Again, a referral by the legislature. Beginning in 2014, there will be a limit set on the annual percentage increase in property values used to determine property tax rates to no more than 5% above the previous year. And it establishes a single limited property value as the basis for determining all property taxes on real property. Arguments for 117 are that it will protect property taxpayers from dramatic increases in valuations that often lead to significant tax increases. It would cap annual increases in the value of real property to 5% over the value in the previous year. Argument against Proposition 117 is that because it would mean less revenue floating to the state of Arizona, it impedes the ability of elected officials to make fiscally responsible decisions to support government services. Motivation? Again, like the previous proposition, it's chipping away at the tax base for the state of Arizona. Reduce the taxes down to the size that they can be drowned in the bathtub, so said the anti-tax fellow. Major supporters, Farm Bureau and the Chambers of Commerce. Opposing, the Tucson Hispanic Chamber. My take, another effort at cutting taxes for the sake of cutting taxes without consideration of the need for revenue to provide government services. And it's important to know Arizona is a low property tax state already. It ranks 32 among the 37 states that have property taxes. I'm voting no on 117. 118, again referred by the legislature. These next two get a little complicated, so I hope I can be clear about how I'm explaining them. 118 changes the distribution formula for the State Land Trust Permanent Endowment Fund, which funds public institutions, including schools. It changes it to be 2.5% of the average monthly market values of the fund for the immediately preceding 5 years. It would be in effect, though, only from 2012 until 2021. Then it would revert to the current formula. Major argument for this change in the formula distribution, the distribution formula, would be that schools would receive $62 million. They currently receive $50 million under the current system. So if this passes, there would be a net increase to schools of $12 million. Major supporters, Governor, School Boards Association, state chambers, Arizona Education Association, and the Superintendent of Public Instruction. My take, I oppose changes in the distribution formula of the endowment fund because you never know about unintended consequences. And in everything I've read about this proposition, there's no mention of even potential unintended consequences. Even though this proposal is for limited duration, it still changes the formula. So I'm going to vote no on Proposition 118. Proposition 119. 119 authorizes the exchange of state trust land if the exchange is related to protecting military facilities or improving the management of state trust lands. It outlines the process for these land exchanges, including independent appraisals and analyses, public hearings, and approval by public vote. The motivation for 119 is very clear. Because of provisions, current provisions in the Arizona Constitution, such land exchanges are prohibited. So in order for these land exchanges to take place, we have to change the Constitution to permit them. 119 does that. Major supporters: Sierra Club, Coalition for Sonora Desert Protection, Wilderness Society, Tucson Audubon Society, League of Conservation Voters, Sonoran Institute, Nature Conservancy. My take: I'm generally against changing how state trust lands are handled. But this proposal seems well targeted and allows for, not only allows for, it calls for a public hearing and approval by the public before it can take place. So for that reason, and because of the importance of protecting military facilities and improving the management of state trust lands, I'm voting yes on Proposition 119. Proposition 120, again, a referral from the legislature. This is the looniest one of all of these 9 propositions. 119 repeals Arizona's disclaimer of all right and title of federal public lands within the state and declares Arizona's sovereignty over public lands and all natural resources within its boundaries. Arguments for Proposition 120 are that state sovereignty is fundamental to the security of individual rights, free government, and the inherent political power of the people. Arguments against: think for a moment how ludicrous this sounds. That the state could properly manage these vast public lands at all. For years, the legislature has slashed funding for state parks. What would they do? Would they close the Grand Canyon when times got tough? This is crazy. The motivation here is there are many people in the legislature who hate the federal government, hate their controls, hate them telling us what to do. Even though we're part of the union, we want to be totally free to do anything we want. Major supporters: Farm Bureau, Cattlemen's Association. Major opponents: Coalition for Sonora Desert Protection, Wilderness Society, Sierra Club, Arizona League of Conservation Voters. My take: this is silly and clearly violates the U.S. Constitution. It also violates the contractual agreement that Arizona had with the rest of the nation regarding these lands and resources. How far does our legislature want to go to undo the conditions we accepted when we became a state? I'm voting a resounding no on 120. 121. This is the first of the citizens' initiatives. This 121 gathered enough signatures to put this proposal on the ballot. It's called the Open Government Act. Proposition 121 abolishes the current political party primary election system and creates an open primary, top 2 primary election in which all candidates running for an office appear together on the same primary ballot. And all qualified voters, regardless of party, are able to vote for the candidate of their choice. The 2 candidates who receive the highest number of votes would advance to the general election. This system would apply to all federal, state, county, and local elections, except for those for U.S. president. And as an important footnote, it would change the way the city of Tucson operates its elections because they're partisan elections. Arguments for Proposition 121: more moderate candidates would emerge from one-party dominant legislative districts, resulting in a less extreme legislature. Argument for number 2: creates incentive for candidates to moderate their views so a bipartisan governing majority emerges. Allows independent candidates to run in primary elections, giving independent voters and candidates an equal voice. Arguments against 121: minor candidates and independents won't get to the general election, ballot, which will prevent their ideas from being aired in the general election and will eliminate their ability to gain name recognition for future directions. I say this because, as many of you know, I certainly do, the kind of public involvement in primaries is much less than the involvement in general elections. Second argument against: candidates could claim any political label for the ballot, whether accurate or not, potentially confusing the voters. I could say I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican, and that's what would go on the ballot. Whether I had any affiliation with either of those parties at all wouldn't make a difference. Argument number 3: one political party can recruit a number of candidates of the opposing party as spoilers to split the opposing party vote. A weak political party could recruit candidates to split the stronger party's vote, with the result that the smaller party has both candidates on the general election ballot. And this is what happened in California this year. Motivation here is to make it easier for independents to vote in primaries, and it will elect more moderates from both parties. That's what the proponents say. Major supporters of 121: Tucson Hispanic Chamber, Tucson Chamber. Major opponents: Governor Brewer, League of Women Voters, Republican, Democrat, Green, and Libertarian parties. My take: little, if any, evidence exists that 121 will do what the proponents intend. I think parties should be free to select their candidates for the general election. I support efforts to increase participation by independents. But the recent vote in California, in its first use of this open primary system, did not increase participation by independents. It also opens the process up to manipulation, to people's ability to commit nefarious deeds. I'm voting no on 121. The last one is Proposition 204, again put on the ballot by Citizen Initiative. It's called the Quality Education and Jobs Act. 204 renews the 1-cent sales tax adopted by Arizona voters in 2010 to provide dedicated funding for public education. It prevents legislators from cutting K-12 funding below the current level. Also, it dedicates a small percentage for children's health care, Department of Public Safety, and transportation projects. The arguments for Proposition 204 is that it provides a dedicated, voter-protected funding for public education that cannot be cut by the legislature. Argument in favor number 2 provides accountability and more immediate feedback by tracking student and teacher performance and provides incentives for improved school performance. It adds kids' care funding so children of working poor families can receive medical care to come to school healthy. Arguments against Proposition 204: 1, sales taxes are regressive and Arizona already has a high sales tax rate. People without children should not have to pay more for educating other people's children. And my question is, who paid for the education of their children? Argument against number 3. It interferes with the legislature's discretion over public spending. It is an example of ballot box budgeting. The motivation for 204 is quite clear: to raise more money for education, since the legislature refuses to adequately fund it. Major supporters: League of Women Voters, Arizona PTA, mayors of Phoenix and Tucson, and the Arizona Education Association. Major opponents to 204: Governor Brewer, former Senator Russell Pierce, Arizona Chamber, and the League of Arizona Cities and Towns. My take: I frankly do not like the fact that such a large portion of the state budget is out of the legislature's control because of citizens' initiatives. Ideally, the legislature, as our elected representatives, should have the responsibility of setting priorities for the state through the budget. However, the legislature has acted irresponsibly in not investing in public education. The voters have no choice but to address this irresponsible behavior by taking things into their own hands. I'm voting yes on Proposition 204. In closing, I am voting no on all propositions except 119 and 204. That's a no vote on all propositions except 119 and 204. I have researched these propositions extensively, and this is my conclusion. Those votes are my conclusion. But I urge you to do your own research. And later on in the program, there'll be a couple of websites put up on the screen. They're there right now. The League of Women Voters website and the Morrison Institute website at ASU. Both of those websites have good, clear, detailed summaries of all of these propositions, and I would urge you to consult them. The propositions are very important to the future of Arizona, especially the process for selecting and retaining judges, Proposition 115, open primaries, Proposition 121, and the funding of public education, Proposition 204. I urge you to do that research. I urge you to go to those websites because this is important. Thank you very much.